Hello and welcome to my first ever national trail. I'm here completing a 92-mile route that starts at Nettershall Heath and ends at the coast at Cromer. So come and join me on my journey as I follow the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path. Nettershall Heath marks the start of the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail and sits just into the county of Suffolk. Heading north, the path crosses the Little Ouse River into the county of Norfolk and also crosses the River Thet a few miles further along. Following the line of the original Roman road, the route crosses the busy A47 dual carriageway before following the path a few miles to the first village along the route, Stonebridge. The trail sticks to the original Roman road for the next 4.5 miles, passing a nature reserve at Thompson Water, and commences its final stage around field edges, along tracks, and finally along the road into the village of Little Cressingham. The start of this low-level national trail begins at the culmination of the Angles Way and the Icknield Way long-distance paths. It's 46 miles to Holme-next the Sea, where I will join the Norfolk Coast Path and continue west to Hunstanton, before finishing the remaining 4 days' walk east to the seaside town of Cromer. To begin with, the opening stretch of this trail takes me through Blackwater Carr, a wildlife-rich woodland that flanked the Little Ouse River and nearby heathland. Crossing the Little Ouse River ends the very short section in Suffolk, with the remainder of the walk set entirely within Norfolk. The Peddars Way follows the edge of West Harling Belt to the north-northwest, and it's along here and at other points throughout the day you can clearly see the earthworks marking the route to the sea. It is thought that the Peddars Way was originally an ancient prehistoric trackway, similar to that of the Ridgeway and the Icknield Way, but was Romanised by the invading overseas army. Take care when crossing the A1066, as it's a fairly busy road, but after that the path follows the edge of Thorpe Woodlands and leads down to the riverbank of the River Thet. Take a moment as you arrive at the River Thet, as the mosaic habitat of reedbed, marsh and woodland around here plays host to some rare and beautiful wildlife. A boardwalk, which is prone to flooding, leads the walker to a footbridge and the route's last encounter with water for quite a few miles. The small wood of Broom Covert is passed with its battle scars of old bomb craters, likely dating to World War II, are hidden away below the dense canopy and long forgotten. Leaving the covert, the route strikes a line along the original Roman road, aiming for the busy A47 dual carriageway. take extra care crossing the road as there's only a small safety area between the carriageways, but once on the other side there is minimal disturbance from road noise until nearer the end of the day. Shortly after passing a small section of Thetford Forest, the path runs parallel to a dismantled railway line that once linked Thetford to Watton and Swaffham, which opened in 1869 and later closed in 1965. There are almost no traces left of this line until further ahead at Stonebridge, which is also the first settlement reached along the Peddars Way. Stonebridge is just a small village with a handful of houses, a mill which stands just off the route dating to 1875, and the Dog and Partridge Inn dating to the late 18th century. A little over a mile of road walking leads you on a gentle ascent to Galley Hill, where a track is joined along the edge of the military zone. It's along this stretch of trackway that the first of several standing stones by Tom Perkins is encountered. The footprints of our ancestors, familiar as our own faces, remote as fossils written on clay, and washed away over and over, over and over. As the path stretches out for endless miles ahead, you may notice the faint trickle of flowing water. This is the outflow of Thompson Water, a stunning wildlife-rich nature reserve owned and managed by Norfolk Wildlife Trust. With around 400 post-glacial depressions known as pingos, the reserve is home to 19 species of dragonfly, 25 species of butterfly, and over 600 species of beetle. The trail passes a series of large pits before arriving at another of Tom Perkins' poems written on stone. Surveyors have made their lines on land, trapping Albion in a net of roads, a taut web on the edge of empire. This stone also marks roughly where the National Trail diverts away from the original line of the Peddars Way, due to it being lost through millennia. The original route can be seen slightly from the air, with a parch mark just over to the right, running towards the trees. We are nearing the end of our first day along the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail. This straight track leads to the B1108, where the edge of the field is followed into the village of Little Cressingham, a mile or so to the west. With a comfortable overnight stay at Sycamore House B&B, and plenty of time to relax and look ahead to the next day as we progress into the spectacular village of Acre. Day 2 along the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail begins in the tiny village of Little Cressingham and follows country lanes north past the neighbouring village of South Pickenham with views across to Pickenham Hall. A few miles further along, the route enters North Pickenham before joining the original Roman road once more. This is followed for several miles by passing Swaffham and crossing the busy A47. Just beyond is the deserted medieval village of Great Palgrave, where the route turns northwest and descends down a gentle hill, crosses the A1065 and enters Acre by the breathtaking Priory ruins. Little Cressingham is a tiny village with a big history. I've taken time out to visit the nearby ruined church of St Andrew. The church dates to the medieval period with reused Norman fragments. Close by is Little Cressingham Windmill, dating to 1820 and given a Grade 2 star listing. The mill was once used to pump water as well as grind grains. The route out of the village follows quiet country lanes for a little over 3 miles, with views back to Little Cressingham Windmill and views over the surrounding fields. It's along this stretch you are most likely to see brown hare running around the local farmland, as well as an increasingly rare birds such as yellowhammer and linnets. Pickenham Hall is one of the first buildings encountered out of Little Cressingham and was built between 1902 and 1905. Shortly after Pickenham Hall, the route finally leaves the road and follows field edges around grazing marsh and eventually crosses the River Wissey via a footbridge. Leaving North Pickenham behind, the route rejoins the original Roman road once more and passes by the remains of the Thetford to Watton and Swaffham Railway, the same line that was passed yesterday at Stonebridge. A large wind farm just to the south of Swaffham has remained in sight for most of the day, and it's only now that the path is beginning to pass it and heading straight for the busy A47 main road. Take extra care crossing the A47, but take note of the facilities nearby. Just a stone's throw off the route is a fast food restaurant and garage, so there's a chance to top up on supplies at this point. Just as you pass Palgrave Hall, there is the site of Great Palgrave deserted medieval village. The village was mentioned in the Domesday Book and survived until the 15th century. Earthworks including streets survive in pasture and part of a moat nearby, with medieval, Saxon and Roman coins as well as other artefacts discovered at the site. Continuing over Bartholomew's Hills to the northwest, the Peddars Way crosses the A1065 and makes its way round to South Acre and a narrow back road into the village of Castleacre. The narrow lane passes to the south of Castleacre Priory on the opposite side of the River Nar. The substantial remains of Castleacre Cluniac Priory create a romantic and enigmatic scene over the gentle flow of the River Nar. Founded in about 1089, the priory was the home of the first Cluniac order of monks in England, with some of the ruins standing to almost full height. The ruins are in the care of English Heritage, and for a small fee, visitors are able to walk around and explore this fascinating place. Heading into the village, there are plenty of hints of the nearby Norman Castle, which I've decided to explore as I set out tomorrow morning, but there is one final historical treat just up ahead. This is Castleacre Bailey Gate, a spectacular 13th century ruin with two round towers on its northern side, and next to the local pubs and plenty of other accommodation, including the Ostrich Inn and Bailey Gate B&B. Day 3 along the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail begins at the historic village of Castleacre, with the day ahead being one of the straightest paths on any long distance walk. After leaving the castle ruins behind, the route follows several miles of country lanes along the line of the original Roman road. The trail joins a track at an Ordnance Survey column and continues to the crossing of the A148. As you continue along the Roman road, there are traces of prehistoric man living in the area, with several burial mounds alongside the path. The Peddars Way continues in a near dead straight line, past the village of Fring, and eventually to the road, which leads the walker into the village of Sedgeford for an overnight stop. Castle Acre is famous for its breathtaking ruined priory and dramatic Norman Motte and Bailey castle. The great earthworks are some of the most impressive in the country and convey the power of this medieval fortress. The castle was founded by William de Warenne shortly after the Norman conquest, with a country house being built on the site first and then converted into a stone keep around the 12th century. The remains include a large portion of the stone keep with the perimeter wall around most of the site, the layout of the Great Hall in the centre of the bailey, and substantial remains of a 12th century gatehouse on the northwestern side. The Peddars Way leaves Castle Acre along a straight road northwest for a little over 3 miles. For the first half, the route stays behind the hedge line before the final section along the road itself. The route leaves the road at an Ordnance Survey trig point, marking 92 metres above sea level. It's from here on the route sticks to the original Roman road, and manages to avoid almost all roads until the end of the day at Sedgeford. The Peddars Way crosses the B1145, which marks one of the possible overnight camping locations just next to the trail. Several other country lanes are crossed as the path continues further northwest, around Great Massingham, and onward to the crossing of the A148, Kings Lynn to Fakenham Road. From high above the path, it's possible to see how straight the Roman road really is, stretching off into the distance and bound for the coast. Take care crossing the A148 at Harpley Dams, and it's just after here the route gains about 130 feet in elevation, with hints of ancient people who lived in the area thousands of years ago. The first of these ancient sites is a Bronze Age bell barrow, just 70 metres off the path and in the middle of a field. You can just make out a ditch that surrounded an earth platform 1 metre high that was used to bury the dead of ancient Bronze Age man. Just slightly further along is another burial mound. This one is a Bronze Age bowl barrow, remaining at a height of 3 metres and one of the most obvious barrows in the area. The countryside around this part of northwest Norfolk is vast and open, with broad skies and lovely views. The view back along the Peddars Way shows the Roman road once more, as straight as an arrow and a testament to Roman engineering. Looking forward, and there's an end in sight, with the North Norfolk coast beginning to edge closer with every step. The tiny village of Fring is only just bypassed, with the tower of its 14th century church seen over the treetops. I've headed slightly further north to pick up the B1454 to follow that west into the village of Sedgeford and to my overnight stay at the King William IV pub. The fourth and final day along the Peddars Way begins in the village of Sedgeford and follows the road to rejoin the National Trail and original Roman road. Bound for the coast, via the Norfolk village of Ringsted, this is the last settlement until the North Sea, and the last opportunity for refreshments. Home next to the sea is reached after crossing the A149, where the Peddars Way joins the Norfolk coast path. To complete the entire National Trail, I'm heading west along the coast for an overnight stop at the seaside town of Hunstanton, passing a ruined church and taking a detour to an enigmatic shipwreck along the way. Leaving Sedgeford behind, the route rejoins the National Trail by the Magazine, a 17th century powder magazine or armoury, now converted into a holiday cottage. The path turns from tarmac into footpath shortly after, as the route strides northwest for the coastal path. Walking out along this straight path, it's worth noting that this is the last time you'll be walking on the original Roman road, as once you arrive at Ringsted, the Roman road becomes lost through the changing landscape. Ringsted is entered via a small duck pond and is filled with beautiful flint and stone houses, including this stunning 17th century farmhouse. Just round the corner is the Gin Trap Inn, which was built in the early 18th century and a perfect place to stop for lunch or stay overnight instead of Sedgeford a few miles back. Slightly further along, the road passes the village shop, which provides the last opportunity for food or drink, until the end of the day at Hunstanton. Next to the village shop is the beautiful church of St Andrew, with its tower dating to around 1300. As the village of Ringsted is left, the route passes round a disused windmill by Mill Farm. The mill has been given a Grade 2 listing and dates from the early 19th century, and it's from this point that the sea is clearly seen for the first time on the whole walk, and on a clear day it's possible to make out the Lincolnshire coast on the other side of the Wash. And I, being here, have been part of all this, caught and thrown like sun on water, have entered into all around me. Just after this final poem, the path continues down to cross the A149 and joins the narrow lane leading to home next to the sea and the National Trail footpath marker by the beach, marking the very end of the Peddars Way part of the trail. This is where most walkers have to make a decision, to turn right and begin the Norfolk coast path east, or to turn left and follow the 2.5 miles of trail to Hunstanton. For me, I want to complete the full trail, so I'm turning left and following the final 2.5 miles into Hunstanton. Having checked the map, there's lots to see along the way, including plenty of wildlife, a ruined church, and an enigmatic shipwreck. The first point of interest as you enter Hunstanton is the Coast Guard Tower, which originally formed part of a World War II coastal battery. Sitting alongside the tower is the brilliant white Hunstanton Lighthouse, dating back to 1830 and now converted into holiday accommodation. In the middle of the field alongside the lighthouse are the remains of St Edmund's Chapel. The ruins have been converted into a World War I memorial garden, but originally date back to the medieval period, with the possibility of Norman origins. It is said that the coast here was the landing place of King Edmund of East Anglia, later martyred by the Danes. Eventually, the cliff-top path gives way to numerous paths leading down to the extensive mudflats and beach, and visitors can enjoy the unique geological site along the coast. The cliffs beneath Hunstanton are famous for its striking red and white stripe. The stripe is formed of two rock types, a brown layer of sandstone called carstone, and the line of chalk made from limestone. The rock dates back about 100 million years and is packed with fossils of creatures that once lived in ancient tropical seas. Located just below the plunging cliffs is a shipwreck of the Sheraton, a trawler that was launched in 1907. In 1945 it became a target ship before being wrecked in 1947 and left to erode away through the ages. Heading back along the beach and up to the busy seafront, there are plenty of places to eat, drink and sleep. Being right on the trail, I have chosen the Golden Lion Hotel, just behind the remains of a medieval cross, located on the green. The town of Hunstanton marks the beginning of the Norfolk Coast Path section of the National Trail. The route to Cromer starts along the cliff tops, passing the ruined St Edmund Chapel, Hunstanton Lighthouse and the Lightboat Watchtower. Once on the beach, there are a couple of options, with it being firmer underfoot closer to the sea. Once past the signpost marking the end of the Peddars Way, the route makes its way towards Home Next to the Sea National Nature Reserve. Following the sea bank, the route passes Thornham before taking a detour inland to eventually come round to Brancaster, where the edge of the marshes are followed past Brancaster Roman Fort and on to Burnham Deepdale for an overnight stop. Leaving the seaside town of Hunstanton behind, the route begins by backtracking along 2.5 miles that was walked yesterday to the end of the Peddars Way. The cliff-top path passes the ruins of St Edmund's Chapel, the lighthouse and the lifeboat lookout tower to arrive at the beach. I've decided to keep closer to the sea to avoid most of the softest sand and have something a little firmer underfoot to walk on. The wide open sands and pools are home to an amazing array of wildlife, with oyster catchers and redshanks seen all along this section. After about a mile, the route leaves the beach and heads slightly inland to the signpost that marks the end of the Peddars Way. It's 44.5 miles from here to the end of the trail at Cromer, which should take another 3 days after today at a leisurely pace. Shortly after the end of the Peddars Way, the path becomes much firmer underfoot as a hard track is followed along the top of the sea wall. The path leads all the way to Home Next to the Sea, a large nature reserve owned and managed by Norfolk Wildlife Trust and home to many rare species and amazing wildlife. The coastal path actually takes in views of some of the freshwater lakes that make up a mosaic of habitats around home dunes, before following the sea wall once again south towards the village of Thornham. Thornham Church of All Saints dates back to the 13th century with alterations in the 15th and 19th centuries. Just round the corner from the church is the Chequers Inn, which dates to the mid-17th century, and offers food and has comfortable rooms, providing the perfect place for a stop, if starting out from Sedgeford earlier today instead of Hunstanton. Heading further east along the A149, Choseley Road is the point where the inland detour is started. The lane is followed southeast, gently uphill to a height of about 35 metres above sea level. The occasional break in the hedge line allows for some lovely views over the fields and back to the coastline. Once the road is left, there's still about 2.5 miles of track walking northeast and then north, into the neighbouring village of Brancaster. It has to be said that this detour inland is definitely the worst part of the day's walk, with little interest along the way. As you enter the village of Brancaster, you are greeted by the beautiful parish church of St Mary. The church has origins dating back to the 12th century and given a Grade 1 listing. The coastal path follows a boardwalk on the edge of the village and marshes, as it progresses east in the direction of Cromer. After about half a mile, there's an optional little detour to take a look at Brancaster Roman Fort. The Roman fort of Branadunum dates to between 225 and 250 AD and replaced an older fort on the same site. Although only earthworks and crop marks remain, there are reports that stone walls remained in situ on the site until the 18th century, when they were demolished. Other crop marks around the site show the layout of the Beghaus, the civilian settlement that grew up around the fortification. The coastal path passes Brancaster Staithe, providing a chance for seafood and ice cream before the walk makes its way along the marshes once more. The marshes and waterways around here are extensive, with hundreds of boats dotted along the horizon and countless channels amongst the salt marsh. Turning inland into Burnham Deepdale, there is a chance to see the village church, with its rare late Saxon round tower dating to between 1050 and 1100. Opposite the church is Dalegate Market, with several shops including a cafe offering tasty food and breakfasts, and a small supermarket and petrol station. Located next door to the petrol station is Deepdale Hostel and campsite, providing suitable overnight accommodation. The second day along the Norfolk coast path begins at the village of Burnham Deepdale and heads out along the top of the sea wall. The long sweeping path passes Burnham Overy Mill to arrive at Burnham Overy Staithe and rejoins the sea wall, making its way straight to Holcombe Bay. It can be hard going as the trail follows several miles of soft sand, but keeping close to the waves ensures firmer ground underfoot. Passing Holcombe Gap, the trail keeps to the south of the pine woodland to arrive at the coastguard station north of Wells. The straight path then heads south, leading into the bustling town and harbour. The Deepdale Cafe can set you off with a content and full stomach today, and with only 11 miles to complete, there's no need to rush this lovely day's walking. Setting off along the sea wall, there are some lovely views over the salt marshes, with dozens of narrow channels teeming with wading birds and wildlife. The route approaches large areas managed specifically for wildlife, as it makes up a vast nature reserve covering 19,000 acres and of international importance, and entirely within the Norfolk coast area of outstanding natural beauty. The Norfolk coast path briefly heads off the sea wall and aims for Burnham Overy Mill, a Grade II listed building dating to 1816. Burnham Overy Staithe is a beautiful traditional coastal harbour, offering a potential overnight stop for walkers planning their own itinerary, and the perfect place to stop, rest and watch the changing skies. Leaving Burnham Overy Staithe, the trail follows the top of the seawall once more, as it makes its way north along Overy Creek to Holcombe Bay and the vast sand dunes and beach. The next section onto Holcombe Gap is pretty tough, as 2 miles of sandy beach is followed. Keeping closer to the waves ensures firmer ground underfoot, as does keeping close to the pine woodland once reached. Holcombe Beach is renowned for being one of the most stunning and unspoilt beaches in the country, and it really is. The lack of facilities and commercialisation really adds to the charm of this beautiful place, and during the summer months it can be overwhelmed with visitors. An interesting historical feature just off the route, but visible from one of the viewpoints in the pine forest, is an Iron Age fort. These are rare in Norfolk, and the only remains are earthworks marking the boundary to the site. The Lookout is a brand new cafe offering facilities to some of the 800,000 visitors to Holcombe Beach each year. Built to provide lovely views over the nature reserve and produce minimal waste, it's the perfect place to stop for a brief rest and a snack before pressing on along the trail to Wells next to the sea. It's almost 2 miles along this track before any signs of civilization are encountered in the form of a caravan park just by a beautiful lake. This lake marks the point where you'll cross a busy car park and join the bank along Beach Road by the Coast Guard station. The bank is a dead straight path and, as you can see, during the summer holidays is crowded with people and almost mimics a long queue into the town of Wells. Alongside the bank and Beach Road is the Wells Harbour Railway, a full-on cheat for those walking the coastal path, but a fun way of getting from the harbour to the beach. Built in 1976, the railway runs for 1,100 metres and runs regularly through the summer. The station also marks the way onto Wells Harbour and dozens of cafes, restaurants and suitable overnight accommodation. The third day along the Norfolk coast path begins at the coastal town of Wells next to the sea and follows a relatively straight line along the edge of the salt marsh, east in the direction of Blakeney. The first encounter with civilization comes in the form of a campsite and car park at Stiffkey, which is passed, continuing east to the next port of call, Morstan Key. Morstan Key offers facilities for the walker with a small National Trust shop selling refreshments. The sea wall is then joined and followed to the neighbouring village of Blakeney, which is one of the most popular seaside villages in Norfolk. The sea wall then continues round Blakeney Marshes to the village of Cley next to the sea and an overnight stop. Wells next to the sea is a large coastal town with a very popular quay. Its bustling streets can be packed with holidaymakers through the busy summer months, making this short section a bit of a shock to the system compared with the quiet marshes that came before. The town has plenty of shops and cafes to set off the day with a good breakfast and a full lunchbox. Following the lane along the quay, the route quickly heads away from the crowds once again, with views over the creek and surrounding salt marsh before joining the sea wall. A short jut inland allows for some views over a small freshwater pool, and if you look north from here you may see some old wooden posts in the middle of the creek. This used to be a footbridge for a public footpath, now lost and replaced by the sea wall. A short section through the trees leads back to the open marsh, which is followed for several miles before civilization is next encountered. A brief and unexpected encounter with tarmac indicates the site of a World War II anti-aircraft training camp and Cold War military installation. A wide open track into the marshes on the left marks the approach to Stiffkey car park and campsite. The campsite provides the opportunity for an overnight stop for walkers creating their own itinerary. As you pass the campsite, you may notice a rare circular World War II pillbox, previously thought to be from World War I, to which excavations suggested otherwise. Continuing the progress east, there is a short turn inland around Freshers Creek, with several pools to the right along the River Stiffkey. This is a great place to sit up on the sea wall and watch the wildlife enjoy this beautiful area. About a mile or so further along is the most substantial encounter with holidaymakers since Wells Next the Sea. Morstan Quay is owned and managed by the National Trust, with a fantastic lookout tower offering views over the surrounding marshes, as well as light refreshments at the tiny shop serving snacks and drinks. It's at Morstan Quay that the seawall is rejoined, with a new path laid over the top. It's easy walking with lovely views over the marshes once again, as you stride your way east to the tourist hotspot of Blakeney, which edges ever closer with every step. Entering Blakeney via the Blakeney Hotel, which offers a restaurant and overnight accommodation, leads you onto the popular quay and large car park for the hundreds of thousands of visitors that head this way every year. Sitting just back from the car park is Blakeney Guildhall, in the care of English Heritage. The Guildhall is actually the remains of a medieval merchant's house that dates back to the 15th century and possibly later used as a guildhall in the medieval period. The superb brick vaulted undercroft has survived in excellent condition and is free to explore. The final push to Cley next the sea follows almost 3 miles of the sea wall, as it takes a long sweep around Blakeney marshes. You will pass an old wooden boat wreck of unknown date, but so close to the path it's almost irresistible to head off the trail and explore. As you reach the corner of the marsh before turning south towards Cley, there is an information board with details of a hidden historical feature lost amongst the grass. Blakeney Chapel occupies a small island to the north of the coastal path. Old maps list this as chapel ruins, whilst excavations that took place in 2003 and 2004 showed it was used for domestic and agricultural purposes. It is possible that later in the chapel's life it was converted into a Warren Lodge and stands as the current theory. From here the path continues south along the sea wall straight into the stunning coastal village of Cley next to the sea for a quiet overnight stay to prepare for the final day along the Norfolk coast path. The fourth and final day along the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail starts off at the village of Cley next to the sea and follows the sea wall to the expansive shingle beach to the north. Roughly 3 miles of shingle is followed east, past Gramborough Hill and eventually up to the Clifftop Path. The Clifftop Path passes Sheringham Golf Course and tops Skelding Hill for stunning coastal views. A gentle descent into Sheringham allows for a lunch stop before the path continues up over Beeston Bump and past several caravan parks to eventually descend down to the pier at Cromer and the official end of this national trail. This is it. My final day's walking along this great national trail begins at the stunning coastal village of Cley next to the sea. The wind has really picked up today and completely changed direction, with a strong northerly gale coming right off the North Sea, making the going much harder today. But to start with, there is the beautiful Cley Mill to enjoy. The mill dates back to the late 18th or early 19th century, depending on sources, and has been converted into accommodation. For those exploring the coastal path with a little more spare time, should certainly look at the Norfolk Wildlife Trust Cley Marshes Nature Reserve. The reserve is home to some rare birds such as marsh harrier, bittern and bearded tits, but is also a refuge for thousands of wading birds and waterfowl over the winter period. The National Trail actually heads along the western and northern edge of the nature reserve, allowing for plenty of opportunities to stop along the coast and watch the reeds and marsh for these elusive and endangered species. As you arrive at the sea and vast shingle beach, it marks the start of one of the most arduous sections of the entire trail. Just over 3 miles of shingle awaits, with only brief moments of respite, and to be honest, it's tough going and progress is slow. The trail passes a World War II pillbox, partially submerged in the deep shingle bank at Cley Eye, and one of several World War II sites along this stretch. Roughly 2 miles along the shingle, a small grassy hill is encountered called Little Eye. It seems that along this stretch of coast, the term Eye refers to a small island or hill, as with Blakeney Eye yesterday and Cley Eye earlier today. Little Eye has some substantial World War II remains, including a gun emplacement, pillbox, and other remains on the summit. The trail heads off Little Eye to the east, with a further mile of shingle to walk, but with another hill interrupting the path. This tiny hill is Gramborough Hill, and stands about 30 feet above the surrounding beach and marsh, and owned by the National Trust. The views back along the shingle are beautiful, and to the east you can make out the final stretch of shingle before the trail starts to head up the cliff-top path. Due to the ferocious winds and sea spray, I've opted to walk along the landward side of the shingle beach, which offers something a little firmer underfoot and a bit more shelter. As the trail starts to leave the shingle beach, it passes the World War II remains of Weybourne Camp, and now in the grounds of the Muckleburgh Collection. A final section of shingle past Weybourne Car Park allows for a half-mile detour into Weybourne to access local facilities and accommodation if required, otherwise the path heads up a gentle ascent to the cliff-top path. The route passes more World War II coastal defences which overlook Weybourne Beach. The surrounding cliffs show the true force of what the crashing waves can do to the crumbling North Norfolk cliffs. As you stride out along the cliff top, take a look inland and you will see the mid-19th century Weybourne Mill, which was last used in 1916 and converted into a house in 1920. Good progress east towards Sheringham is made, thanks to solid ground underfoot and the enticing prominence of Skelding Hill with its Coast Watch lookout station promises some amazing views to come. Skelding Hill doesn't disappoint. The views stretch for over 10 miles to the west, with the great spit of Blakeney Point seen stretching into the distance. Heading east, the view really opens up over Sheringham, the largest settlement since Hunstanton some 40 miles back, and offering visitors plenty of facilities and worthy of a leisurely exploration. From this high point you can also make out the next hill on the other side of town, Beeston Bump, but first let's take a look down at Sheringham. Sheringham's seafront is protected by large concrete structures, otherwise the town would have been lost to the sea decades ago. Facilities are plentiful and easily accessed with some right on the seafront itself. Just as you head along the promenade, you will pass Sheringham Museum, which explores the rich history of the town over the centuries and absolutely worth a little stop. The trail continues past beach huts and begins the 200-foot ascent to the top of Beeston Bump. The start is up a staircase away from the beach, followed by a gentle tarmac path, which turns into a footpath gently climbing to reach the Ordnance Survey triangulation pillar. Beeston Hill, or more commonly known as Beeston Bump, with its 63-metre high summit, offers superb views over Sheringham and west along the coast. On the summit is the base of a World War II observation post and several benches to allow walkers to enjoy this fantastic panorama. East from the summit, the view really opens up, with a bird's eye view over East and West Runton, and in the distance, the end of the walk, with the church tower marking the seaside town of Cromer. Recent changes in the Norfolk Coast Path route means that the new trail sticks much closer to the cliff tops rather than taking a 4-mile detour inland over Beeston Regis. This does mean that the walker misses out on a county high point at Beacon Hill, but the new route is just as enjoyable, following field edges along the cliffs and the option for refreshments at East Runton. The final stretch into Cromer follows a track through another caravan park before turning back to the A149 main road and quickly turns back to join the clifftop path at the Cromer town sign. As you reach the clifftop path for the final time, there is a view that every walker on this route looks forward to. Cromer Pier can be seen just around the cliff edge, and with every step the bustling town moves closer. The Cromer promenade is followed past several gardens to arrive at the pier and the original ending of the Peddars Way and the Norfolk Coast Path National Trail. Since the development of the England Coast Path, the trail has recently been extended for a further 40 miles to end at the Norfolk-Suffolk border at Hopton-on-Sea. But for me, the original route is absolutely worthwhile in its own right, and I may return in the future to continue the remaining coastal sections. For my first national trail, I can say that I've thoroughly enjoyed the route, with its varied landscapes, rich history, wild windswept places and dramatic coastal scenery. It's a route that can be enjoyed again and again.